Good morning, everybody. Thank you to the National Wool Growers Association of South Africa for inviting me today as a panelist to say a few words to you guys. I won't be able to attend live because the 2nd of June is public holiday in Italy and I'll be spending time with my family. My name is Giovanni Schneider and our company has been in the wool business since 1922. Although today we are a global operation that deals with all sorts of animal fibers, our core business is still very much focused on fine and superfine merino wool, especially for the European and particularly for the Italian spinners and weavers. So you'll find today's presentation mainly focused on the premium apparel market, but although I don't have the accurate figures, I believe that the fast fashion industry suffered just the same dynamics last year. As we were forced to stay home and our social life has been limited, we have very few opportunities to dress up. Interior fabrics and sportswear perform much better as an industry, but within these product categories, wool, and especially merino wool, is a very marginal fiber. For the Italian industry, actually for the whole European industry, 2019 had already been a difficult year. And that was related to the big price hikes that happened since 2016. At the time, many retailers were very worried about these increases and thought they could continue further, so they tend to buy more than their requirements in order to mitigate the risk of a further growing market. So at the beginning of 2020, the whole supply chain was loaded with finished and semi-finished goods, and everybody was hoping for a good season in order to clear the stock. But then COVID happened, and it would be redundant to mention what has happened in the past 18 months. So let's focus on these very self-explanatory figures. These are independent researches conducted by the most important consulting firms last year. They show that the luxury market decreased by 22% as an average, and you must know that none of these studies factors in the third wave of pandemic, which affected sales around Christmas and the sales of the first 3 or 4 months of this year. On top of that, you must understand that these statistics refer to the broader luxury industry, which includes leather goods, watches, and many other products. Clothing, together with traveling and hospitality, have been one of the sectors that were hit the hardest. Sales in China and in the Middle East proved to be very resilient, and safe hubs like Hainan Island, which is off the coast of China, and Dubai became the new shopping destination. On the other side, losses in the European Union and the United States have been much higher than that. Out of all, China was the least affected country by COVID, as its lockdown lasted only 2 months and happened during their holiday season, which is when a Chinese consumer usually travel and spend their money abroad. So at the end of the year, the market actually increased a little bit over 2019. Different situation was regards Europe and the US, where shops have been closed for 3 months during springtime, which is not a big problem when it comes to wool sales. They reopened over summer and closed again around Christmas time. Since then, we had a series of unplanned opening and closures until a few weeks ago. Christmas time obviously is a huge shopping opportunity for everything, including wood products, but also January and February are very important because that's when winter sales happen, and that's the time when shops clear their stocks of unsold product and prepare for the new collections. And as a result, global sales of clothes worldwide plunged by 30%. And here we're talking about clothing in general, but if we look deeper into the product categories where wool is the predominant fiber, such as formal menswear, coats, winter accessories, and so on, reductions have been much higher. To give you some extra figures, last year, something like 15,000 stores went bankrupt in the US only. A similar number went bankrupt in Europe, and some more will close down in 2021. in this very scary scenario, South Africa and New Zealand decided very wisely to stop the sales, to stop the auctions for a few weeks in order to protect the price of wool. Australia should have done the same. Processors and manufacturers, including ourselves, wrote formal letters to the Australian wool bodies asking to stop auctions after their August recess, just for a few weeks in order to let the price settle. But as the requests have been ignored, the market plunged to below 800 in September, costing the industry hundreds of millions of dollars. It will take some time to see some consistent improvements. This statistic show that the full recovery will happen only at the end of 2023. Actually, some newer studies seem to be a bit more optimistic than that. But when we again look at the clothing or the wool business in general, we think that we'll have to get used to a smaller market where both demand and supply find a new balance based on lower quantities. Smart working has a massive impact on the reduction of sales of suits and therefore fabrics. In addition to that, events also represent a good opportunity for selling good products. Wedding parties and holidays are always a good excuse to buy something new. And as a result, very few of us had the chance of wearing our favorite suit in the past year. Sales of wool and cashmere fabrics are therefore still 40 to 50% below pre-COVID level. And I'm talking about Europe. They are stronger in China though. These days, offices are slowly reopening. Events and traveling might pick up from January onwards. So we'll hopefully see some improvements from September on, but there is a huge gap to recover. In 2018, Italian weavers altogether were producing something like 70 million meters of cloth. Last year, they went down to 25 million meters, and you should understand that the first orders were already collected before COVID. The industry seems to agree that the demand will stabilize at around 50 million meters in 3 years' time. Knitwear has recovered much faster. Some spinners had already returned to pre-COVID levels, and that's because sweaters became cheaper, they're actually easier to wear, and they are much easier to buy online. This is not a bad news at all for the South African industry because your wool is particularly suitable for knitwear production. Generally speaking, I could say that the big players, those with the sales office around the world, have been able to show their collections, to show their creativity to their customers, and manage to gain some market share from the smaller players who rely very much on physical trade show to meet with brands and retailers. The best performance out of all have been hand knitting yarn spinners. They had one of the best years in a very long time, but this is a very volatile industry, and it was the growth was mainly driven to the fact that people were forced to stay home. So they expect some reductions in the near future. And this is the dramatic representation of the world's wool industry since 2017 and its forecast until 2025. As you can see, the volumes of wool used by the apparel industry were already declining, not so much in weaving, but mainly in knitting. And that was because wool had become too expensive for medium-priced sweaters. Looking back at last year, the production of wool fabrics dropped between 30 to 40%, and the expectation, as I said before, is that this particular industry will not reach pre-COVID level in a foreseeable future. Personally, studies and consultants apart, I tend to be a bit more optimistic. I think that lower merino prices will help knitwear sales and the industry will remain strong. Knitwear sales are very price sensitive. Lower merino prices will not help revive the weaving industry because in this case the cost of the raw material is marginal compared to the cost of the final garment, simply because the production process is far more complicated. The reduction of weaving of the sales of fabric is mainly related to the change of habits of the consumers, which are preferring more casual and comfortable clothes. And that's why weavers are now struggling to find alternative use for their fabrics, and they're looking into more attractive markets such as women's wear, which requires a lot more fantasy, and premium sportswear. Finally, the world population is growing, we all know that, and therefore our market base will increase. So maybe lawyers and bankers in New York or London won't be spending as much money in suits as they used to do in the past, and that's why the outlook for fabric is still very negative. But now wool is used in a variety of new products such as sportswear, automotive, healthcare, where our current market share is very, very small, but the potential could be huge. There is just one way, though, to catch these new opportunities, and that's by proving that wool is the most sustainable choice. This seems, of course, obvious for all of us working in the industry, but we are competing on sustainability credentials against very powerful organizations. The strongest is SAC, Sustainable Apparel Coalition, who represent something like, I think, 250 of the largest fast fashion and sportswear brand. The smallest of them probably has a turnover of $3 billion. And they blame natural fibers for the use of land, for the use of water, and especially for the emissions of CO2 and methane produced by the animals. As I said in my previous slide, synthetic fibers producers are claiming that their products are more sustainable than natural fibers. And to contrast this incorrect approach towards sustainability, IWTO teamed up with the cotton industry and all the other animal fiber industry to answer these claims. So when we are accused that animals produce CO2 and methane, and this is bad for climate change, we have a very simple answer. Climate change was not an issue before men started digging underground looking for fossil fuel, which, by the way, is the raw material for synthetic fibers. When they say that our industrial process consumes too much water, we say that we use it, but then we clean it and we return it to the environment as clean as it was. Whereas synthetic fibers release microplastics, which pollute the oceans for hundreds of years. When they say that their products are longer lasting simply because their yarns are stronger, we say that we are biodegradable and products should not last forever, because if it lasts forever, it cannot be considered to be sustainable. On top of that, we're pushing very much on the fact that wool and cashmere and all natural fiber can be very easily recycled. When they say that we use too much land, and that's probably one of our strongest claims, we answer that we don't use it, we farm it. We create jobs in rural areas where probably there would be no alternatives, and we're not exploiting the land. We're actually improving the quality of our land, of our farms. I think it's very important that for the first time ever, the wool industry, thanks to the combined effort of IWTO and the Australian wool industry, is funding a huge project and teaming up with other fibers which we once considered to be our competitors, because we have a greater good. We have a common greater good. So COVID will hopefully pass soon, but some of its effect will remain. Sorry about before, but I got stuck. What we are experiencing over here in Europe is a big consolidation process affecting the entire supply chain. Small weavers and knitters are trying to sell to largest competitors, and brands who have already undergone the consolidation process. Today there are less than 10 groups controlling a very, very big portion of the whole clothing and accessory market. Brands are starting to buy their best suppliers. And that's because service is becoming the key to differentiate their products and to gain customer loyalty. New customers are far less loyal to brands as their parents used to be. So brands must improve their ability to quickly adapt to market changes, and therefore suppliers will be engaged with brands in managing this end-to-end process. And finally, sustainability, as I said before, has become the prerequisite for staying in business in the long term. And the role of supplier is very important to help the clothing industry to prove its sustainability credentials. Growers in particular will be required to take action because raw material accounts for a very big portion of the ecological credential of the final product. Practices like regenerative agriculture, improved animal welfare, a more traceable supply chain are already attracting some premiums, but until now, quantities available under these schemes are still quite limited. And in this regard, I must congratulate all of you from South Africa for being one of the leading responsible wool standard producers in the world. Until a few years ago, we were buying just a small portion of our requirements from South Africa, but now we're growing month after month, and we're thinking about investing further into your country. And finally, I am a wool trader. I'm a merchant, so some of you might be interested in my view of the market in the next few months. Well, I believe that if the prices didn't go down, despite the very low demand and the large offerings in Australia during the month of May, there is only one way the prices can go, which is up. They will not return to the peak level of 2018, but probably they will settle somewhere in between. So I believe that we're gonna enjoy a decent second half of 2021 and a good 2022. Thank you very much for your attention. I wish all of you a great event, and I'm looking forward to traveling to South Africa very soon. Ciao.